Thank you for being with me so far. So now I proceed back to the code where I explain the two aspects that you need to understand in order to program an experiment, which is basically the client and the server project. So what you see is every experiment has its path, which is edukit impl dot ultimatum game dot client and then ultimatum game dot server and so on. So these are the two standard packages that you'll be creating. And how you start an experiment is you just first create an institution. You go to your Eclipse, then go to your class, and then let's say you call it ultimatum game institution 1. And then your superclass in this case is institution, which is belonging to the macroeconomic system in the server project. So that means you are already inheriting methods from the superclass. So I'm just replicating the steps for you. And then here you can see that there's an error message because there are some unimplemented methods. So first, the thing is you need to specify what the institution extends. So this will be available only if you create an environment. So let's now create an environment. Ultimatum game environment 1, and that will be extending the environment class. All right. So now you see you have something in the environment and you need to map these two together. So you say parameter for the institution is ultimatum game environment 1. So that solves the first error. And now you have a few more errors because you don't have a constructor. You need to add that. And then you have another error which says some of the methods are not implemented from the superclass. And you add these methods and then you're good to go. Now you see a lot of to-dos on Eclipse which shows which are the parts of the code that you need to change. Yeah, so that's your basic starting point. So what you see is a constructor which does some basic groundwork, and then you see three methods in the institution, which is the start period, the process message, and the end period. And in the environment, you see a couple of things, which is the role matcher and the subject group matcher. Right? To give you an abstract idea of the institution and the environment. So the institution describes what is common between the treatments and what happens in an experiment in the beginning of a period, during a period, and at the end of a period. So this is your functionality within each period. And what is defined in the environment is all the additional stuff. So basically, how are roles matched across periods? How are subjects grouped across periods? And then what are the differences between treatments? Like, for example, let's say you have one treatment with some number of parameters and you have another treatment with another set of parameters. And then you try to differentiate between the different treatments in the environment. So this is for your first level of understanding. Now let's go back to the institution. So I'm going to actually jump to the code that is already existing and show you how the institution there looks like. So for the constructor, you see that all that is done is the instantiation or the linking to the environment. So the environment that's passed is linked to the local variables. So there is a local instance of the ultimatum game environment here, and this is linked here. Okay, so that's pretty much a good starting point. You might have additional stuff in the institution depending on your experiment's logic. Now we move to the start period. So in the ultimatum game, you see that there were two roles, which was basically the requester and the responder. So in the start period, the first thing that is done is assign these roles to the subjects. So basically go through all the memberships, and there are two classes, there are two objects declared, which is the requester and the responder. The reason for this is because in the institution we want to identify um, which roles will receive which screen, because we have two screens, and depending on the role of the person there will be a new screen shown. This may not be the case in your experiment, so you might not have to do this. So you might have to show the same screen to all subjects, or you might have to show a set of screen for a particular group. So it depends on your experiment's design. But what you can see is a generic way, and we have one example in which we basically look at the role of the subject, and then depending on the role, a different screen is shown. Right? So here you see the logic for showing a screen. That's basically show screen, requester, which is the person, like the role to which it's shown. Then the name of the screen class, which is ultimatum game request screen. Then a set of parameters to that screen, which is parameter requester. So the parameter requester has just been constructed here. So you see that for every experiment, you want to define your own set of variables which you want to pass around as data. For example, in this case, I want to pass what is the information to be shown on the screen, what is the input value, and what is the action performed. For example, if the action, if at all an action was performed or not, which is like clicking a button or something like that. The input value would, in this case, represent how much money a person is willing to share, right? So this is a generic class which extends param object, and you can basically construct this class the same way that you did the institution and the environment, and this can be placed in your client project, right? You can basically define any number of parameters that you want to pass around, and these parameters can be passed within a period. Like I said, if you go back to here, within each period, I set these values for the institution. So let's say you want some more information in here, you can obtain these information from the environment. So let's say between each treatment, you want to show different kinds of information, like let's say you have an ultimatum game with 10 euros being shared and an ultimatum game with 50 euros being shared, and depending on the treatment type, you want to set this value. So you can obtain these values from the environment, set it in here, and then send it across. Alright, so much for the parameter object, and now you see that there are just two simple commands which you show to the requester and the responder, and the responder receives the default waiting screen, which is something we have implemented. So basically all the subjects will have to wait till everybody is done. You can just reuse the screen. So that's the start period. Next we move on to the process message. So the process message describes what happens when a button is clicked from the clients. So let's say there is an input text, and then he enters a value and then places on submit, plays or whatever. So as soon as he does that, as soon as any of the clients presses one button, the process message is invoked. So I'm going to stop this video and continue again in a bit.